Welcome, Simon. Can you introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about what your role is and how it's building a brighter future in the West Midlands?
Thank you, Rosie. My name is Simon Clarke. I'm the Managing Director of Procurement and Supply Chain for the Integrated Care System of Birmingham and Solihull. And what that means, I'm responsible for all the procurement and logistics for the Queen Elizabeth, the Good Hope, Solihull, Heartlands, Birmingham Communities, Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health, and the Royal Orthopaedic Hospitals. So it totals around about £1.1 billion of non-pay expenditure on goods and services we procure each year.
That's fantastic. And why do you think now is the right time for us to be having a conversation about social value in the region?
I think it's well overdue, so I'm not sure about now. That's why now is important, because it's well overdue. As you know, Rosie, we kicked off our Birmingham and Solihull Integrated Care System social value programme in September to really influence our non-pay expenditure and the public purse that we spend, encouraging suppliers to do more to improve the health inequalities of Birmingham and Solihull, given that we've got the worst health inequalities in the whole country. So here is better than anywhere and we need to do it rapidly.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those health inequalities and why they might be so bad?
Yes, so first of all, 40% of our population in Birmingham live in the most deprived areas in the UK. 1 in 2 children live in poverty, and that's multiple areas of poverty: bed poverty, energy poverty, cost poverty, poverty. So it is something that we need to engage with now to make young lives and also those old, so not old lives, but those older individuals to have a better life expectancy. In Birmingham Solihull, in parts of Birmingham Solihull, there's a 10-year life expectancy dependent of the areas you live in, and that needs to stop. It's not right.
So that means if you live in an area of high poverty, you will die 10 years earlier.
10 years earlier. And not only is the statistics that bad, also you will live in ill health for probably 10 to 15 years more than those that live in more affluent areas.
It's shocking.
Extremely.
So, Simon, can you tell me a bit about the breadth of some of the suppliers that you work with?
Yes, we have a vast range of suppliers. Within Birmingham and Solihull, we have probably around about 7,000 suppliers that look after our whole health economy, ranging from multi-billion pound global international organisations to small organisations, including some of our voluntary sector organisations here in Birmingham and Solihull, and a mass array of different organisations providing that spectrum of goods and services that we require to provide a quality health service.
Brilliant. And what's changing within those relationships for yourself as a procurement professional and those suppliers, whether they're in the kind of sales team, they're the CEO, they're kind of part of the delivery team? What's changing and what do they need to know?
What's changed? Well, there's so much change in regarding the public procurement landscape. On the 24th of February, there's the new Public Procurement Act, which is going to bring in so many changes and opportunities for suppliers and also the public sector to be able to have more flexibility and opportunities to do more within those areas. 12 months ago we had the provider selection regime that was implemented, which is a new legislation which concentrates more on clinical services, sort of front of house operational services, again ensuring that we are maximising and utilising the wider marketplace, including more opportunities for our SMEs and third sector. So it is a changing landscape. It's in the next 12 months, it's going to be a very difficult landscape as we navigate ourselves around the multiple legislations that are currently ongoing. So we have the Public Contracts Regulation 2015, which is currently the public procurement regulations that we all follow. January 2024 brought in the provider selection regime, and then February 24 this year we'll be bringing in the new Public Procurement Act. So as an organisation in the public sector, it's going to be very challenging because we're going to have to be managing 3 different legal legislations at any one time. But for suppliers and also, more important, our SMEs and third sector of voluntary charitable faith social enterprise organisations, I think there's going to be a little more opportunity, especially as the Act brings in more transparency and more opportunities for suppliers to subcontract and engage with SMEs to hopefully deliver a wider social value deliverable opportunity.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's amazing to see that the legislation is coming in place and that there will be more opportunities. There's historically been, a power imbalance in some of these kind of relationships where they have existed. How do you think it's baked into the legislation to avoid that? And what does that look like regionally?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think there'll always be probably a little bit of a power balance. I don't think we're ever going to get away from that, given that in some of the products that we buy and procure, I'm not saying there's monopolies, but there's less suppliers out there. Some of the suppliers do buy up some of the smaller organisations, and hopefully what we do want to do is continue the employment and the service being provided locally. But there is a constant challenge. Everybody is expecting more value for money, and in some instances people think that's the lowest best price, but no, we need to really start looking at value for money, and this is where the new Procurement Act will actually change that balance, is where social value and sustainability net zero is going to be a minimum 10% criteria. So local organisations should be able to be scoring that maximum 10% before they get into the wider scoring of the deliverables and the services. So I do think it is going to change the balance, but it's about the maturity of the NHS, of how we do ensure that the social value element is providing the benefit for our own health inequalities locally, and not a tick box for those large organisations saying we support a charity, we do 500 hours of volunteering a year. If it's not impacting your local authority, your local area and your local locations, then to me it's not delivering social value.
And that's so important, isn't it? Because where you have a national organisation or a global organisation, it's great that they might be supporting a national charity, but actually for those people who are dying 10 years earlier, it's not going to make any difference. So actually, we're in Birmingham, that supply might be in London, and it's great that those London residents are getting that support. Yeah. But actually, for all of that spend that's happening from the region, it's not bringing any value. So how are things changing to make that value happen in this region? Yeah,
and I'd give another worse scenario. Some of our suppliers are based in Europe and Brussels and Germany, and it doesn't even come into the UK. So those London residents don't benefit at all. So it is about actually working with our suppliers with the expectation of social value. As you were aware, you attended our conference, we've moved to a local portal called Match My Project, where we're bringing those organisations together. So we're bringing the third sector and all of our supply base together to start create those relationships and opportunities to move forward. I think at the moment we're still educating them. We still have large corporations going, well, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean social? We've got a corporate social responsibility strategy, but clearly it's about their own organisation, their own workforce, which is great. We want to ensure that there's equality, diversity, inclusion and everything else in their own organisations. Those are the sort of organisations we want to work with. But if it's not delivering locally, then we need to make a completely step change. And that's where I think BSOL, Birmingham and Solihull Integrated Care System and Board have made that first step to make it local.
Definitely, and the conference that you talk about was in September 2024, where you invited 100 of your biggest suppliers to meet with about 50 or 60?
About 57, you're absolutely right, 60.
Social impact organisations and faith organisations as well from the region, to just talk about what we each do, talk about the changes in expectations because of the new Procurement Act, and start to kind of match organisations up and build those relationships. And the great thing about that conference was actually it was co-created over a period of kind of 4 or 5 months with a small selection of social impact organisations. So, you know, there was a lot of the potential pitfalls that could have happened in this, you know, quite big forum were ironed out prior to it happening to enable really meaningful exchanges and understanding of what's going on within the region, some of these health inequalities, some of the challenges that people that we work with and support are facing, to really bring some of those huge but also small suppliers with limited resource and those big suppliers with lots of resource onto the same page to understand actually they all do need to be thinking in a different way and having that step change. And I think, you know, one of the things that came out of that discussion, again, it was that power imbalance of you know, these organisations coming to the table and saying it is really important, these statistics are shocking, but we're a commercial organisation, and when we're tendering, then there's, you know, limited money that we can put into this work. What's your response to that?
I think also I want to move the myth that actually it's limited money, because I do think on both sides there is an expectation that they're going to have a giant donation. We've already done a few things well here in Birmingham and Solihull by working with our organisations about what they are. So we've got extreme bed poverty in Birmingham and Solihull. So I aligned our local supplier, Arjo, who do beds and mattresses, to work with the charity organisation that looks after the bed poverty, to actually provide more beds and more mattresses available. To them, that's a very limited cost, and they don't have to put a large sum of money in that. We had one of our suppliers who also said, well, we deliver to all the hospitals and all my trucks come back empty. And there was already an offer going, so if you need things moving around, work with us and we'll move. You know, it's removing that cost. So it's about the capabilities and opportunities that a lot of suppliers don't even look at. That for all of our third sector, there's an added value, there's a massive value in those, you know, small things, but it's large things for us. It really makes a big difference. So that's where the supply base need to start thinking differently. You've got logistics fleets coming through, then actually is there an opportunity to help with delivering and moving, and over the Christmas period we use some of that fleet to work with some of our organisations to collect things and move things around. And the beds one is another opportunity where we're using the supplier of the already capabilities. And it was interesting because talking to that supplier, they went, well, we didn't know, Simon. So I think sometimes it's just about that awareness and giving that visibility, and you'll see they adapt and change. And we need to be doing more of bringing, you know, the one thing the conference brought out was actually that conversation. And we need, and as you and I have already spoken briefly, that we need to, as we move forward, we need to start bringing our third sector and our suppliers together a little bit more. You know, creating a sort of a group of like-minded individuals to make that difference. Because I think that's what they need to do. And me and you and I, can't do it on our own. If we don't actually start getting individuals educating, and they can be educating in themselves, we just need to create those forums, those opportunities so they can make that difference.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, what you've done is to start that shift, and some of the challenges that you provided on the day, and it sounds like we were talking before we started filming about some of the conversations that you've had since. You've really been challenging those suppliers of thinking about actually what is the size of their organisation and how much should they be putting in, whether it's low or no cost to them, and to you know, with a cost to them,
yes.
To really put into the local community and actually shift the dial. You know, saying we already deliver some apprenticeships over here. You know, that doesn't make any difference. It's not in the region.
Absolutely.
And it you know, it isn't going to really make that step change of what we need for the region. So it's great that you've got the platform in place. One of the challenges that I gave to you was around some of the things that are naturally kind of put onto the system. So again, business as usual, right? We want a kind of a team building day where we'll come and paint the fences, or we'll come and redo whatever, or put the Christmas decorations up in hospice or things like that. And actually, we really need to bust the myth that volunteering hours are always positive for a third sector organisation, because by the time you've put a team member on organising a group of 20 individuals, or even just having that one point of contact, sometimes that's 20 hours of work. And what's the impact to that organisation, and therefore what's the impact to that community of that piece of work? Painting fences, putting the Christmas decorations up, it's not sustainable, it's not long term, it doesn't really have a significant impact to the organisation. Whereas, delivering those beds and mattresses, you can see the impact.
Yeah, you can.
So, how are you developing, and how are you going to continue to develop the piece of work, whether that's the platform or the conversations that happen, to ensure that suppliers really think long and hard about how they can actually make those impactful changes to the community, but also that social impact organisations and faith spaces don't fall into the trap that history and experience has taught us, that you just have to take work upon yourself.
Yeah. You and I both know, especially in Birmingham and Solihull, this is the start of our journey. And with the support of Patrick Vernon and the chair of the Integrated Care Board, and David Melville, the chief executive of the Integrated Care Board, we couldn't ask for better sponsors now to make that difference. It's going to be a difficult journey, because I think it is about education. Because I think we have had a history of volunteer days come and help us sort of build the new park or swing centre, come and help us litter picking or whatever it may be. And I think what we need to be doing is ensuring that we're asking, one thing, and we've shared this a few times, you made me really think at the conference when you challenged the whole conference, don't come tell us what you can give us, come and ask us what we need. And I think that's the shift we have to do now. And having these new workshops, bringing suppliers and the third sector together, I think between you and I and the wider group, we need to make sure our third sector is prepared, and then not looking at the old guard of saying, well, I'll just take anything. Actually, let's really look at this as value, because while we've got suppliers on the other side of the table that are basically a blank piece of page, they're desperate to help us, they want to know, let's make sure we're really asking for the biggest value that we can possibly get, knowing that they're able and capable to deliver that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important as well, because the education piece is very important, but we can't have that as ticking off some of the spend. There are organisations, and there's different industries actually, where they've been at this point of education, where going to meet the supplier or the matchmaking events, having team members join education workshops, those are hours that they put against social value. Actually, what impact is that really having? That should be coming from your CPD budget. That should just be coming from your normal business as usual in your organisation. It shouldn't really be allocated against this agenda.
No, I absolutely agree, and one of the things that we're doing within BSOL, and I'm hoping other organisations will pick this up and move it forward as a trend, is actually, as you've already pointed out, the sustainable benefits. So what we're saying is, through the procurement process, so there's the corporate social responsibility that we can use our larger corporations to support the real now and the real issues now, but then also there's the procurement activities. And what we're doing with those procurement activities is we're putting social value as a key performance indicator in their contract. So the non-delivery of their social value commitment is just the same as not delivering the service. There'll be a breach of contract, and they'll need to rectify that as soon as possible. Because I do feel, and I'm not speaking badly of my colleagues in the NHS, but the NHS previously, it was a tick box exercise for both supplier and organisation. Now we need to be ensuring that we're actually delivering meaningful changes in our contracts that really do help the health inequalities that we have in all of the UK.
And what advice would you give to suppliers that are hearing that and saying, yes, we do want to help, we do want to make a difference, we've got team members or we've got some limited resource. How would you encourage them to be bold in designing how they can support?
That's a really good question and a trick question, I think, in the sense of I wasn't really prepared for that one. It is education, I think, as you and I have spoken. I know you've been doing this for a long time and achieved some amazing things. But I think the suppliers are just stepping into this arena where we are going to have controls, we're going to have demands, and we're going to have expectations. So really, I didn't need them come with an open mind. Yeah, to actually, for them also to educate us along the way. You're asking for this, but we've got this, or with some corporations, we don't know all their different sister groups they've got where we could tap into those, or they could offer those. So I think it is going on this journey together, being open and transparent. Yeah, what can we do with each other to make a real big difference?
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of collaborative practice. Actually, that co-creation of some of these relationships, but also just, as you did at the conference, and I'm sure you will continue to do, just being really transparent with some of these key health challenges happening in different areas of the cities, and then talking about some of that best practice of what organisations can do. And again, then it's that transparency around what is your business model, where do you have this flex, and the same for the social impact organisations as well.
Yeah.
And I think that enables more of a long-term view. When we work on a project basis, it's often what's new and shiny. When actually, the day-to-day work of the grassroots organisations is the stuff that really needs to be supported.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of support for people through sports or cultural activities that really makes an impact on mental health and employability and then those long-term outcomes. That's the stuff that really needs to be supported. But when we work in that kind of collaborative way, then we can take that longer-term vision rather than, right, I've got this fire that needs to be put out, and where's my supply chain partner who hasn't got back to me in 3 days? Yeah. Actually, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that we're different sized organisations as well, and we might work in different ways. So as a small organisation, we might be a bit more agile than a multinational that's got multiple layers that they need to kind of sign things off on. So I think if we work in that collaborative way, we can take that longer term view and put things in place, more proactively.
You're absolutely right, and I think as you've already pointed out there, with some of our suppliers, they need to support it in that co-production. So when we did the conference, we had our third sector and the NHS looking about how we do want to engage with the marketplace. We had an opportunity to engage with the marketplace as we go forward. We need now to include our supplier base as part of that co-production to make sure that what we're asking for they're able to deliver, how we're communicating. There's one version of the definition and one version of the truth, so there's no actual concerns and queries about, well, what are you asking for? It's very, very clear. But also utilising that supply base to help some of those small sort of voluntary sectors and all the voluntary sectors, but some of those small ones that don't have the resource to be able to keep feeding back and say, right, we've got this, do you really need it, and chase up. So the co-production needs to change as we move forward, and and I think what Patrick and David and I have had the conversations is that we need to continue our conferences. It can't be just one now. We need to be moving our conferences forward to ensure that we keep repeating the messages. But one of the other things that we need to do, which I'm hoping will encourage our third sector as well as our suppliers, is our conferences need to change the dynamics a little bit more into reward and celebrate. Demonstrating what has been done, demonstrate what's been done, and hopefully putting peer pressure on our supply base to go, well, why aren't I part of that? Why haven't we done something like that? So I think this is where we do just need to change as we move forward, and that co-production needs to be with our supply base, from the multinationals to our locals or regional suppliers, to ensure there is a clear understanding of what is needed so they can adapt as well, because it may be that they can't have nothing now, but it doesn't mean they can't adapt to start providing those needs as they move forward and grow.
Absolutely, and I think that's really important, isn't it, to kind of understand where on the journey you are. So for perhaps kind of the next conference where we'll continue those relationships and start to match in a different way, for the suppliers who hear, from the social impact organiser, their top 3 biggest costs, and actually they can't support with any of those, but perhaps at some point they could, or they know somebody else in the supply chain who absolutely could. I think it's just that kind of linking up of different
capabilities and opportunities.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about transparency, and within the contract, making sure that the social value is written in, and if they don't deliver them, there'll be a breach of contract. Do you have an idea of what that looks like now? With transparency notices and how often they might be, and for suppliers who haven't experienced this, what will that look like?
The new Act's going to bring far more transparency than we've ever had in the public sector. There's always been transparency there, there's always been fairness, but I do feel there's a lot more transparency in starting way before the procurement process. So we have to produce our pipelines in the NHS now, so that will give organisations the time to prepare about, well, we could bid for that, rather than waiting for something to come out on the tender side and suddenly go, I've got 28 days to deal with that. I think one thing that should be said just before I answer the question fully is that also in the new Procurement Act, SMEs and third sector are also can apply for an extension on the tender practice, but to give themselves more time to prepare, because they don't have the resources or an back office people just waiting for the tender to drop on their desk. So that's also where organisations need to realise what opportunities they have, and they should be requesting for those extensions. The transparency notices also bring the opportunity for everybody to manage and be aware of what's going on in the contract. So if you've just lost a contract and that supplier isn't meeting its requirements, you can put in chat and go, well, what's going on? You can also, the transparency notice, talk about value of contracts as well, so we need to ensure, and the total value delivery that it's moving forward. So it's an opportunity for suppliers in the third sector to really challenge us to go, hold on a minute, you've awarded this business to another, but they're not delivering. So it's holding us to account, but it's also giving that opportunity to suppliers not to actually miss the opportunities that are moving forward. So I think, and also one of the other opportunities that we're pushing in the Procurement Act is for our supply base and our larger supply bases to actually engage and subcontract with SMEs and third sector to deliver the service. There's more flexibility in that as we move forward. And again, I think that's going to be a learning for our third sector, but potentially it also could be a massive opportunity to meet their social value piece by utilising that third sector locally to deliver those services and be the voice of the community.
Amazing. And can you kind of spot some of those opportunities at the moment, looking at your supply chain? Are there any that kind of come to mind that could work really well?
I haven't checked yet, Rose, I'm going to be really honest with you. I would be very surprised if there wasn't. And I'm lucky I've got to that place in my career now where I'm not dealing with those pipelines, but we're still spending over 1.1 billion. I would say there's ample opportunities where that should be doing, but that doesn't mean that it also, and we spoke about this just earlier, that doesn't mean we have to carry on with the status quo. Just because the supplier's always delivered it that way, they might have now opportunities to say, well, let's have a rethink about this. Rather than having my trainers come from Middlesbrough and Newcastle and Humberside, actually could have used one of the third sector to help train up my workforce to be able to support that servicing, maintenance and support piece. Could we utilise local communities to help give feedback on the service that they got to make us a better organisation? So I think there's a lot of opportunities of thinking differently and as we move forward, and especially for suppliers to really deliver social value, they've got to think differently.
Absolutely. It's just shifting the whole kind of frame of reference of
Absolutely.
what social value is, and really moving towards that impact piece. What's the long-term difference going to have to residents of Birmingham and Solihull?
Absolutely.
So can you tell me a little bit more about BSOL and the work that you do, and how that might have impacts to other spaces within the NHS nationally and just more widely as well?
Yeah, no problem at all. So Birmingham and Solihull Integrated Care Board is responsible for all the health and social care across Birmingham and Solihull. So all its partners are the NHS organisations, local authority, police, fire, so all of those supporting organisations that can make a positive and make an impact to the health and social care. From my point of view, from the procurement point of view, Birmingham and Solihull was one of the first, again led by David Melbourne, the Chief Executive, to bring together all the procurement organisations, and that's where I come in. That's my role, responsible for procurement. Now this allows us to actually be able to work and engage differently with our suppliers. So they don't go to 5 or 6 different organisations anymore looking to how they're procuring, what contracts are coming forward, can they do a bit of a deal here. They have to come to one location, which allows 2 opportunities for us: one, to get best value, but also one, to get the best social value outcome, because we're talking about the total spend for the system, not 5 different individual sort of projects or values. So we've created a single procurement organisation that's responsible for all of Birmingham and Solihull in our NHS organisations. We have a logistics warehouse in Aston that allows us to actually create better value by, well, twofold: better value by actually going direct to the supply base and having that collaborative spending power, but also creating the last mile. So we have electric fleet, so we were supported by the government and DAF to create some of the first 18-tonner electric vehicles. So it's a very large, fast go-kart, that's the only way to describe it. But it means that actually we can also support with some of the health and equality issues we have in Birmingham. So all our deliveries come into Aston warehouse, and then what we do from then is we pack it down and then distribute it out through our electric fleet out to the other organisations. So removing those emissions and trying to support the Birmingham Clean Air sort of drive as well.
Amazing. I live just outside the city centre, definitely in the clean air zone, and I appreciate everyone's efforts. So.
and so we should, with some of our young children, especially in the inner city in Birmingham as well, with some of the respiratory problems that our children have, we need to make a big difference. And these are long-term actual illnesses if we don't do something in that early intervention.
Absolutely, yeah. With all the schools, primary schools, secondary schools on some of these main roads, it's a huge issue, isn't it?
And especially around Birmingham, dual carriageways and the ring roads and everything. We've got schools sitting on the side of it. We've only got to look at the children's hospital. It's sat right opposite the expressway.
Yes.
So yeah, we know the flow of traffic and the problems that causes.
Fantastic. And how can the wider NHS learn from the work that we're doing here?
The wider NHS are really starting to embrace what we've done. I've been really lucky that we were supported by NHS England at the conference. Priya Bailey, the commercial director of NHS England, took it away, and days later the sustainability social value team got in contact with us. We've presented to their team now of what we've done as a programme, and they want to include that as a best case scenario, and more importantly as part of their toolkit going out. So hopefully we will able to share this much wider across the NHS landscape, and especially with our procurement is changing. That's fab.
That's fab to see, because the solution needs to be local. But actually, you can only really achieve that with support from, the national, backing from the national kind of players. And actually, if this works really well, then being able to spread the message to other regions will be incredible, so that other smaller grassroots organisations, faith spaces, get the same opportunity to be able to make that difference to their communities.
And it's important for us in the West Midlands, because here in Birmingham we border so many different systems as well, where actually there is an overlap because of the border. We see it from, the Black Country and Birmingham, with City Hospital being right on the border, that actually we should be doing more collaboration together across all the other systems, working around BSOL, because those health and qualities cross over the borders. So we need to be doing more to make a healthier region, never mind anything else.
So we are where we are at this point in time, so it's a couple of weeks away until the Procurement Act becomes live. What do you think some of the risks are for those suppliers, for your team, and how do you think they might be mitigated?
Some of the risks is, as I've said previously, for my team and also for the supply base as well, is making sure they understand the different legislations that we'll be working through for the next 18 months, 2 years probably, with some of the legacy contracts and some of the procurements that have been going on since September or before, right up to the 23rd of February. So they'll be already on a different legislation. I think the key bit for me, it is about the complexity. It's about understanding the expectations. And what I could say, especially for our suppliers and more importantly our third sector, the government website, so .gov.uk, if you look at the Procurement Act, there is a lot of webinars and videos that can actually help you navigate as a supplier the changes to the Procurement Act. And also the opportunities that Procurement Act will bring. But the challenges, I think at the moment, come and ask me on the 1st of March, I'm not quite sure. It's all been laid out at the moment. For my team, the administration burden of all the transparency notices is probably going to be our biggest challenge. But they're required. I think we need to be more transparent and open about what's going on, and we just need to utilise technology that those notices can be published without driving too much administration into my workforce to be able to focus on delivering the social value programme we've got and delivering best value across Birmingham and Solihull.
And on the supply side, how can they help with those transparency notices? What can they do to kind of make that easier?
The transparency notices will all come from the local authority, the public sector, so local authority, NHS and other public sector. So they all are going to be produced. I think to ensure we have a seamless process is that they need to deliver what they said at the beginning of the contract, and continue to drive value into all regions wherever they're supporting. But I think the most of this will actually come from the procurement organisations in that public sector world.
And as part of that link back to those social impact organisations that they say they will support, will there be that communication in place? Because in other industries, we've definitely been included in tenders, never heard from that organisation again, and then a year or so later just seen a press release of they won that piece of work and they've delivered it, and we will have been built into that tender and been part of the reason that they won that. So is there that communication with those third sector organisations to make sure?
It's a real good point, Rosie, because that's where I want to change the attitude of the NHS, and it will be changed in BSOL, it already is. Because whatever they commit to in their tender will be documented and part of the contract. We have a full contracts management team now who will be reviewing and monitoring performance measures, monitoring their actual service levels, monitoring what they are doing. So actually, if we're not getting the feedback from the social value impact, then they will be brought in, and as we spoke earlier, there will be consequences that apply. I think the key bit as well, just not from the supplier organisations and third sector, is also the third sector will be able to get better feedback now from the procurement exercises they may look forward to. So there's opportunities post the award, hopefully they're winning, but if they're not successful, then there is that opportunity to be able to get better understanding of what was missing. Is there some learnings we can take away? And we've always offered that in BSOL, but I do expect, and hopefully from this piece, we will be getting our third sector to be pushing that, and more importantly putting themselves forward so we can actually ensure they're included, or if something goes out we have a watching eye with that pipeline. if there's services and opportunity to go, well, we could deal with that, Simon, then I do want them to let us know, because when we put the tender out, we go, well, actually, they haven't bid. We'll have plenty of time to go, are you aware this tender's out at the moment? You did show an interest way back when we put the pipeline. So hopefully we can create a better environment and that communication with organisations.
That's brilliant. I mean, there's already lots of support out there to help third sector organisations and faith spaces to upskill on how to bid for public sector work. It is still a huge job, but with that kind of ability to request an extension, the ability to get detailed feedback and support if they're not successful, I think that should hopefully make a big difference. And as time goes by, hopefully we'll see a much more kind of diverse supply base, including lots of social impact organisations as well.
Yeah, it's and I want to give some reassurance, because something's happened just recently where, again, my team is still getting educated and trying to pull all this together. But we have, it's right here, I'm not wearing it right now, but my name is badge, which all NHS employees wear, just to make sure they can be identified and be greeted, especially from patient visitors. It's good to have a name. So we've been procuring in a company in Humberside for a long time, and it was not long after the conference. And one of my category managers came along and said, "Oh, Simon, we've got the 2 bids here, but these are 10 pence cheaper, this badge." And this was against one of our own third sector here in Birmingham, Better Pathways. I will mention them because they're a fantastic organisation that truly embrace the EDI, the equalities, diversity, inclusion in their workforce, support with real challenging needs and really creating a fantastic environment. And their actual badge was 10 pence more expensive. And then I went, well, okay, but surely they're from Humberside, and these are literally down the road, 15 minutes away. So where's the net zero carbon emissions reduction? And more importantly, what is the social value that this place in Humberside is providing us, and what do they do as an organisation? And I think that's the learning we've got to do with our workforce, and now it's gone to Better Pathways to have that support. Because, and more importantly, what I do want, and I use it as my strapline for Birmingham and Solihull Procurement Collaborative, is making the BSOL pound go further. Well, making that BSOL pound go further is if we put the pound in BSOL, and then it constantly makes it go further and more advantageous. So hopefully that demonstrates some of the changes that we're making on just some of those smaller projects, but ensuring that the third sector is part of our thinking when we're looking at awarding and contracting as we go forward.
That's brilliant to see, because you've not just made the BSOL pound go further by putting it into the local economy, but actually that extra 10p is paying for the additional management time and the additional training time for when you do employ the majority of your workforce with mental health issues. Absolutely. Or disabilities, or from our homeless population. It does cost more money. So actually, you're funding that really important work that will be impacting the number of rough sleepers we have within Birmingham and Solihull. Yes. It will be impacting, the tax levels and all of that kind of stuff. So actually, that is so incredibly important, because putting the BSOL pound into the area is great if you're kind of giving those contracts to SMEs, but actually there is a whole another level of support for these social impact organisations that it does cost a little bit more money.
It does, but I think it is actually equating to true value. And that's where we need to, and the new Procurement Act will also be looking at real value. That's why, again, it's having emphasis on social value and net zero. So, it is about that mindset. And also, you did say earlier on, and maybe I should have picked it up, that's where suppliers need to act differently. That it's not about the bottom line cost of a product, it's about the true value of what you're going to be bringing. And that true value is including that sustainability, net zero and social value aspect to evaluate a better true like cost of the contract you're bidding for.
And the real impact within the region. it's great to go out and do a presentation to some young people, but actually going out and doing something that completely changes their
Absolutely.
lives is, delivers just so much more impact,
Yes,
and therefore so much more social value.
And it's that positive impact
Yeah.
as well, because young people and other individuals within our community see the true impact for themselves, and therefore will probably share and really benefit from that. So you're absolutely right.
Amazing. So Simon, what does social value mean to you personally?
I've been pondering this question because I'm going to be really honest with you. Been in business for a long time. I was in the Royal Navy. I worked for large corporations such as SmithKline Beecham and then GlaxoSmithKline before I came into the public sector.